when the Odd Couple was in Baltimore. And then we played for 2 months in Los Angeles, and again she was in the Odd
Comedy Hour. All in the Family had been made as a pilot 2 years in a row for ABC.
Never truly heard her side. Now at 78, Sally has finally spoken about Rob Reiner, and what she revealed isn't loud or bitter, but it quietly reshapes how we understand their past, their success, and the emotional cost of staying silent in Hollywood. Sally Struthers entered American homes at a time when television still felt personal, when characters felt like family members and weekly shows became rituals.
He was plastered. My co-star, Al Lettieri, the big thug who played the gunman, he was plastered.
Patience and emotional intelligence in a show built around conflict. Millions saw her as the heart of the series, someone who softened harsh conversations and made uncomfortable topics feel human. Behind the scenes, however, the environment was not always as warm as it appeared on screen.
It was in the script.
But it hurt.
Well, a stunt lady could have done it, which is what they wanted. But
Girl. And then his face was...
Sally was young, dedicated, and serious about her craft, but she was also navigating an industry where confidence was often mistaken for authority, and quieter personalities were pushed to the background. Rob Reiner, who played her husband on the show, was already thinking ahead, already shaping opinions and building influence beyond acting. While Sally focused on performance and emotional truth, Rob was developing a sharper presence.
Okay, so we got Samantha. We have little Samantha.
Yes, so that's the first thing I did.
Yes.
But through subtle moments where decisions were made without Sally's input and conversations moved forward as if her voice wasn't necessary. At the time, Sally didn't complain publicly or privately in a way that made noise. She understood how quickly women could be labeled difficult, and she knew that reputation could follow someone forever.
Was it an accident, or did you trip her up or slip her a bait or anything?
What she didn't realize was how deeply that silence would shape her emotional journey. As the show grew bigger, so did the gap between how the public saw Sally and how she felt internally. She became known as dependable, sweet, and agreeable, qualities that audiences loved but that sometimes worked against her behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Rob's assertiveness was rewarded, and his opinions carried more weight as the years passed.
Doesn't matter though. It's Mel Brooks. It can go wrong and it still works.
And it's still right. Whatever's wrong is still right.
And I don't think...
Rob transitioned smoothly into directing and storytelling power, while Sally's career took paths that were often misunderstood or unfairly judged. The difference wasn't talent, it was opportunity and perception. For decades, Sally watched interviews, retrospectives, and discussions where the history of the show was told without her emotional experience included. She didn't interrupt or correct the record, even when it hurt. She believed that time would eventually balance things out, but time, instead, deepened the silence. At 78 years old, Sally Struthers finally reached a point where the weight of decades of silence felt heavier than the fear of speaking. For so many years, she had carried the unspoken truths of her own experiences in Hollywood, moments that had quietly shaped her life and left marks on her confidence, her career choices, and even her perception of herself. The truth she had held back was never about creating drama or seeking revenge. It was about reclaiming her story, her voice, and her sense of dignity after decades of watching the narrative around her be written by others. In that long silence, Sally understood that speaking now would not be about anger, it would be about honesty, reflection, and finally putting into words the emotions that had quietly defined her path in the entertainment industry. When Sally chose to speak about Rob Reiner, the reaction was immediate because no one expected such a calm, reflective approach. She did not come forward to accuse or attack, nor did she seek to shame. Instead, she approached her revelations with precision and care, carefully navigating the fine line between honesty and respect. What she revealed was not a single dramatic incident, but a pattern of subtle dismissals, of moments where her voice, her input, and her creativity seemed secondary to others in positions of growing influence. She spoke of a career where confidence and assertiveness were rewarded more than insight and emotional intelligence, and where quiet endurance was often mistaken for compliance. It was this quiet endurance that she carried for decades, and it was only now, with the perspective of time, that she could finally articulate what it had cost her. Sally described moments from her time on All in the Family when her opinions were brushed aside during critical creative decisions. These moments, while seemingly small in isolation, compounded over years, leaving her with a sense of invisibility that was difficult to articulate at the time. She remembered instances where scripts were adjusted without her input, dialogue choices were made without consultation, and subtle decisions were taken in a way that minimized her role behind the scenes. For a young woman in Hollywood, navigating a male-dominated industry, these experiences were both confusing and demoralizing. She recounted with clarity how these patterns affected her confidence, leading her to question whether her voice truly mattered, even though she had dedicated herself entirely to her craft and to the emotional truth of her performances. Yet, Sally never positioned herself as a victim. She explained that part of surviving in Hollywood meant making strategic choices, even when those choices came at a personal cost. Remaining silent, she realized, was often safer than speaking out. Women in the 1970s and 1980s risked being labeled difficult or unprofessional, a label that could follow a person for their entire career. She weighed each moment carefully, choosing compliance over confrontation, patience over assertion, and reflection over reaction. These were deliberate choices, made with intelligence and foresight, but they came with a hidden cost, a quiet accumulation of frustration, self-doubt, and emotional weight that no applause or public recognition could erase. Sally also spoke about her admiration for Rob Reiner, emphasizing that her revelations were never about personal animosity. She recognized his talent, his intelligence, and his ambition, acknowledging that his ascent as an actor and director reflected his hard work and vision. At the same time, she explained that admiration did not negate the emotional reality of being overlooked, dismissed, or underappreciated. Her insight into their dynamic illuminated a broader truth about Hollywood. The system often rewards visibility and assertiveness over emotional intelligence and subtle influence, leaving some voices unheard while others gain momentum. Her words resonated with audiences because they mirrored experiences beyond acting, experiences of workplaces, relationships, and industries where quiet contributions are often invisible. In reflecting on the emotional toll of those years, Sally described how the cumulative effect of subtle dismissals shaped her worldview. She said that for a long time, she questioned her worth, her ability, and even her right to be heard. She recounted the internal dialogues that had haunted her for decades, questioning whether she had misread situations, whether she had demanded too much, or whether she simply needed to be louder to be acknowledged. These reflections were not rooted in insecurity about talent. Sally had long proven her ability on screen, but in the recurring pattern of being overlooked in spaces where decisions mattered. The psychological impact, she revealed, was profound and long-lasting. What made Sally's revelations particularly compelling was her perspective on forgiveness and perspective. She emphasized that speaking out after so many years was not about vengeance or retribution. She explained that holding on to anger would have only prolonged her emotional burden and delayed her own sense of closure. Instead, she chose to speak with clarity, honesty, and emotional intelligence, framing her experiences in a way that honored both her own truth and the complexities of working relationships.